Welcome to Left East to West with me, Tom Parkin.
And me, Nikki Hill. We're back with another great show this week, which won't include breaking Alberta and Canadian laws by giving your personal data as listeners to the Alberta Separatist campaign.
Yeah, that's a pretty amazing story. There was a video obtained by the Alberta NDP showing Daniel Smith's party president, caucus executive director, at a meeting where separatist campaign workers, like people who are going out for canvassing, are being trained using illegally shared
Yeah,
election data. It's just more evidence that UCP is an architect, not an enabler
yeah,
of this separatist
yeah.
movement. So I thought that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I caught Jason Kenney caught in that, all
Yeah.
kinds of activity around it. Also coming on top of another CBC News report last week that websites and social media accounts are being run through
Yes.
Russia and MAGA promoting Alberta separatism.
Yes.
So lots of layers here we continue to monitor and talk about. But we have something more close to home in Canada. We have a special guest with us today, Josh Bizjak, who's the executive director of the Douglas Caldwell Layton Foundation, who has a lot to say about the themes that bring Canada together. And we're going to talk to him in our feature interview. But first, we're going to start with this week below the fold, taking a look at a couple of important stories that didn't make national headlines.
Okay, Nikki, we had some big news in the labor movement from BC recently. Victoria Uber drivers ratifying their first collective agreement. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we don't always see first collective agreements making any news. This one actually at some point might make a little bit of global news, though, because of the
Mm,
scale and the precedent. So this is one where we're also seeing where workers in what we might call non-traditional
hmm
industries can see the benefit
hmm
of unionization.
Yep.
So breaking it down, we've got Uber drivers in Victoria, BC, becoming the first in Canada to get a collective agreement, which is a milestone because they were also first to unionize. At the
Mm,
end of April, they ratified their first contract, the first contract for any app-based drivers in Canada. And,
mm.
and not just by a slim margin, 99% of the
Wow.
members voting in favor, which is,
Wow.
sort of stats that many unions shout out to.
Good for them.
UFCW
Yeah.
1518 president Patrick Johnson and all the work of his team, the local organizers. But of course, 99% means those big shout out to those union members who voted, and clearly with a lot of conviction here about what they're entering into after a while. So it's actually
Mm,
the global first for Uber drivers. And therefore, we can see where there's some threads here for other workers and other app
yep.
based
hmm
workers for sure.
hmm
Didn't come overnight. Nothing in union organizing
Yeah.
ever does. Nothing in organizing ever does. And it's building out. So here we are in 2026. It was 2022 when Uber Canada and UFCW Canada entered into a national framework, they called it. So that gave drivers and delivery workers the free union representation. So if they were having issues around their workplace, on being deactivated from their accounts, or any other disputes with their employer, with Uber, they had that representation agreement
hmm
that came into place between Uber and UFCW. And I think, in fairness, all parties have to come to the table on a national framework like that. So seeing, a large global organization do that work with the labor movement is really important to recognize as well. Couple things here that make this unique to why BC was the first jurisdiction where we're seeing this happen comes down to a couple of key policies, some we've touched on
hmm
here from the
hmm
current provincial government. So, one single step certification,
hmm
again, something we've had some chats about and why that's different in BC and what it's allowing. So, that lets a union to be certified when they've at least got 55% of workers signing union cards. That's brought in the last few years. And then the other policy that is significant here is BC legislation that came in 2024 that's actually called Workers' Rights in the Gig Economy. It's Bill
Oh.
148. And
hmm
so that introduced stronger fairness measures and basic protections for app-based ride hail and delivery workers. So, one of those BC
Okay.
policies that now we see how it's playing out, and again might have some global precedent here that we see
hmm
in the
hmm
future. And I think, we would be remiss in saying that single step certification isn't just helping the ride based app drivers here. It's also been credited in opening some doors for
Oh,
other
sure.
massive unionization, like in BC, you've had Unifor working with Amazon workers and their first collective agreement as well. So I think, tying in the policies and tying in the work of those unions. I think really important here, Barry Sawyer, he's the national president of UFCW Canada. He noted in the framing here as this historic vote came down, of course, things that we don't necessarily think about all the time is that precedent to hope other governments look at what BC has done here to protect the app-based workers, not just drivers, but app-based workers who are workers who, deserve protection like any other workers. Some cool things in this agreement, which shows, I think, how different they are. One, a signing bonus if you're an eligible driver, but then also quarterly bonuses for trips completed and cancellation rates. They've
Mhm.
got some language that you wouldn't need in other workplaces. So annual bumps when there's wait time fees, cancellation fees, or you're going out of region on mileage. And then
Mhm.
you're also seeing a little bit more here for those drivers who are going to a higher end of rides per year and how much they would benefit. But I think also something cool that's a wellness fund worth up to $500 a year. So not a ton, but still a start here for sick time, health costs like dental and vision that's also funded by Uber, 10 cents from every ride. So I think you see
Mhm.
here where
Mhm.
partnership with the company and the unions is changing some of these conditions for workers. And the other thing I think is that Uber's been proactive in saying that the agreement's not going to lead to higher ride prices for customers in Victoria. So they're sort of talking like this is a key test to see if the business model, because it really is, again, starting with that national framework and going to an agreement, could actually work long term. So interesting one here to watch as we think about labor policy across the country and across the world.
Mhm.
I think before we wrap up on this segment, I think we can't talk about this organizing achievement really without also taking a pause to honor Kim Novak, who is
Mhm.
was the president of EFCW 1518. We lost her far too young on May 5th, 2024. And she was the president when this organizing drive began, brought a lot of passion to it, and sadly passed away suddenly at just 39 years of
Yeah.
age, leaving a young family and I think a labor movement and certainly those of us that knew her personally, very shaped by her passion, her courage and commitment, inspired to
Mhm.
do things like this, which make the world a better place for other workers and other people. So I think, we all owe Kim Novak a deep gratitude, a deep debt of gratitude for really believing in this fight, seeing the vision of what was possible for workers. She also played a huge role in defending workers during the pandemic, who those workers being in grocery stores and retail, really different type of front lines. And so we thank Kim for her legacy. It's so enduring and proud, and raise a toast of gratitude to her.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I never met Kim. I certainly heard about her and I knew of her. But what I knew of her was that she seemed to be an effective leader because she could really
Yeah,
bring people together. And
yeah,
it also, this as you were talking, it also makes sense. This breakthrough would happen in BC because there can't be any doubt that BC is Canada's leader in cutting the
hmm
red tape that politicians try and wrap around unions to stop them
yeah,
from being able to bring people together.
yeah,
So big labor breakthrough in British Columbia, and I expect that will help workers in other provinces. That this momentum will migrate to other provinces, and people will say
hmm
what they got in BC, we want to get here in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, Quebec, etc.
yeah.
And that's the way this country has moved forward. It seems to me very often. So
Yeah,
good
and it makes
work.
it above the fold still, but yeah, it's a great step
Yeah.
forward. So
Yeah.
congrats to you, CWA 1518. Not just because
Yeah.
I'm a member of that union for
Oh,
in
good
their
for you.
different creative ways in their professional division, but because this is really a great progress for them. And
Mm,
and shout out to organizers who never get enough credit on these things too.
yeah.
So we're flipping from BC over to Ontario, and even out here in BC, we have heard the headline news about Doug Ford trying to buy a $30 million private plane, and then some tumbling support. But Tom, you have the below the fold story on some of the political nuance that
Yeah.
led to this point.
Yeah, yeah. I heard a CBC News panel last week, where a reporter in the panel claimed that the drop in Ford's popularity was all about him trying to buy this private jet. And I just thought,
Mm,
like, holy hell! Like if this is the depth of political analysis in Ontario, no wonder we have Doug Ford. Like, it was just so thin. This story has been in the making for months, probably about like since last fall. That
Mm-hmm.
is the below the fold story, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what the data shows too. This tumbling,
The
um,
polls, yeah.
it started way back in the fall, but it's just really accelerated lately,
Right.
and because this premier has come to a tipping point. Or I think, and this is what I'm going to try and explain more accurately, the tipping point has come closer to him. So
Mm-hmm.
for a long time, the Ford government had terrible approval scores on almost everything: healthcare terrible, housing terrible, environment terrible, poverty terrible, education terrible. We had an election in the winter of 2025, and despite all these terrible scores, Ford won again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and you'll remember after that, there was a lot of disappointment with the Ontario NDP leader, Marit Stiles. It was like a lot, very hard for a lot of us to understand how anybody, the official opposition leader, could be beaten by such a lousy, lousy person. So there was some soul searching. And in the end of
Mm-hmm.
August, whatever that is now, 9 months ago, I suppose, there was a really key caucus meeting, pivotal. Uh, they recognized that they were attacking Ford on the issues NDP voters care about, but that was not working.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the insight was it was never going to work because
Right.
Ford voters don't care about
Right.
those issues.
Yeah.
They don't care, so it's not going to move them. And as long as the PCs were at 45%, and you didn't move anybody, they were going to win. And the NDP was going to lose, and this was going to go on. So, yeah, Ford had terrible approvals on most issues, but on economy and crime, those are the only kind of two, his approvals were okay.
Mm-hmm.
So these were the legs that were really holding up his support. That was the analysis. That was kind of the insight. So those were the issues that Ford voters cared about. So if strategically the NDP could kick those legs of support out from under
Mm-hmm.
Ford, then those voters would fall. They would fall free. So the caucus decided, okay, we're going to kind of switch here, and we're going to focus on some economic issues and especially jobs and
Mm-hmm.
affordability. So
Yeah.
just after the caucus meeting in September, the ONDP caucus, the ONDP rather, had a convention. It was kind of disorganized affair. It left a lot of people grumpy. Mart did not get a strong leadership review vote. I think it was 68%.
Yeah.
And on the last day of the convention, she said things are going to change. So over the next few weeks, she let go all of her key staff. A fourth
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
who had been the campaign director, had already left. So literally all of her top staffers were gone. It was a total reset. When the legislature came back a couple of weeks after that, the caucus actually did focus on jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So where before they were swinging at what they wanted to punch at, they now tried to hit what made PC voters unhappy and uneasy.
Right.
The NDP focused on question period, on job numbers, on plant closures, on youth unemployment. They branded Ford a jobs disaster. They pushed the message that they're in their digital comms. They'd link to the issue so that, they talk about the housing crisis, but they say this is also a crisis for workers who want to build homes and are
Mm-hmm.
unemployed. And
Yeah.
in 7 years of premier, Doug Ford had never faced a line of attack that was actually focused on his base of support.
Yeah.
And just kind of parenthetically, like during this whole period, the Liberals are leaderless. They're having an identity problem. Are they a right-wing party? Are they going to be a progressive party? So this time they're really responding. They're not leading.
Mm-hmm.
So it really felt to the NDP like if something's going to happen, they're going to be the ones that did it. And in fairness, sometimes they wobbled, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they wobbled, responding to the daily progressive conservative clown show, rather than staying on target. I saw that. But mostly
Yeah.
they managed to get back, correct on course, and position job loss and high costs as the price of his
Mm-hmm.
scandals. So linking
Yeah.
these ideas. And so now, after doing this for a few months, and making the PC base more uneasy about jobs, about affordability. The NDP's attacking him every day on this stuff. When he started to step on rakes, they started to bang him in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And now, when the NDP does when this happens, the NDP will connect these things. Um, he's doing this dumb thing, and we all know that, like buying a jet.
Yeah.
But that's because he's not doing the right thing, which is creating
Yeah.
jobs and keeping life affordable. So again, keeping the focus. So yeah, there comes a tipping point, and sure, the
Yeah.
jet might have been it, but it is a mistake to think a tipping point is a static thing. The job of an
Mm-hmm.
opposition isn't just to tip a government over when it makes some big mistake. It's to daily move that tipping point closer to the government and make that push easier. So
Yeah.
I think the below the fold story is that strategy matters. To take down a government, you need to degrade their strength. It takes time and persistence. It
Yeah.
takes some luck. And I think the ONDP needs to recognize that to themselves, that when they got off their soapboxes and made some tough choices, it did pay off. It did
Yeah.
pay off. Okay, final thought, Nikki.
Well, I mean,
Um,
there's always pivots
yeah,
here, right? Like you can't, you like
yeah,
you say, you can't be static. And I think we all sort of, it's the lessons learned. We look at below the border and go, how does Trump still have this strong base of
right.
support when the rest of the world is, watching and hoping he's gone
But if you're
soon?
only
So
if
I
you're only
think, but
trying to
if you're
mobilize your existing base of
your base,
voters,
yeah,
then
yeah,
that's a problem. Not that you shouldn't do it, but
totally,
you can't
yeah,
only do that. So
yeah,
just a final thought on this one, Nikki. And this is the problem that they're in now. So there's some success. Um, polls show that the NDP is up and the PCs are falling,
hmm,
but uh, even though the Ontario Liberals are in disarray and fighting, it is the
yeah,
Ontario
sure,
Liberals who are polling second.
yeah,
So
I
the
saw that,
ONDP
yeah,
kicked out the legs of PC support, but they are going to
yeah,
have to deal with the next problem. That while, yes, they are the official opposition, in the minds
yeah,
of Ontario voters, they are not. The
yeah,
provincial Liberals are, in this province, the default answer to I don't want to vote Conservative. That is
right,
just,
yeah,
you can call it unfair, whatever, it's reality.
yeah,
So the
yeah.
challenge now is to find the strategic path to a change in that default thinking. And again,
Mhm.
be disciplined, stick on it, so that when this government falls, it falls to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also I think we'll talk a little bit more in our show too with our guest about the concept of winning as social democrats as well. So
Yeah.
lots of relevant points
Well,
here.
sometimes I think those things go together because we've talked a lot about economic development. We talk a lot about jobs
Yes,
here.
yes.
We talk a lot about affordability. I don't think that it's only people in some social democratic voters who care about that. And if
No,
we can
not
provide
for
better
sure.
solutions, you know, then I
Yeah.
think we're doing a good job for ourselves.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with our special guest. Welcome to Left, East to West, Josh Bizjak. Thanks for joining us. We were just chatting before the show about a recent kid-inflicted injury. How's your mouth doing?
Thank you very much for asking, Nikki. It's a pretty funny story. I used to be a competitive athlete when I was younger, so I had a partial, like a bridge with a couple fake teeth on it. My little boy, 15 months old, getting curious with his finger, put his finger in my mouth and cracked the denture plate. And before I could
Yeah.
get to the dentist to have it re-glued or fixed, whatever they're going to do, he went in again and actually ripped it out. And so my dentist has decided that it would be best if I
Mm.
just wait a little bit longer and finally get an implant. So that's what we're going to do. It's
Yeah.
me. Thanks for broaching the subject though, because I don't want your audience members a little bit awkward around what's up with Josh.
Yeah, well,
So,
Hey, if you need dental implant tips, I just finished
yeah,
too. So I got
yeah,
all your
that's
hot tips
and
over here.
he for anybody who knows Wesley from my social media, he's an adorable little guy,
He's very
and he
adorable.
thought it was all really quite funny.
really
So
funny. Yeah.
Adorable and very stylish, I would
he's
add.
a cute kid, cute kid.
Okay, well, hopefully we are injury free the rest of this show, not to jinx us. Let's dive into some questions.
Okay.
So, Josh, you are the executive director of the Douglas Caldwell Layton Foundation, which in some ways is a new charity, although it's actually been around for many, many years.
Mm.
But you are a new full-time executive director. You've got a team that you've pulled together. You've reinvigorated the organization and you found a really important and unique role for it. Tell us a bit more about the foundation.
You know, it's interesting how you frame that because in many ways it is new. The foundation was established over 50 years ago by Tommy Douglas. As he exited from politics, he he really envisioned things becoming more difficult in the
Mm,
future, especially for the progressive movement to
Mm.
mhm,
continue with the momentum. And so, I guess it was 2017. I was approached by the then president, David Mackenzie.
mhm,
At the time, I was the director of development at the Broadbent Institute, and they were interested to know whether or not we would be willing to apply for a grant
mm,
from the DCF. And I thought, oh, yeah, of course we would. Sounds great, but why would you want to be giving us this grant? And he went on to explain that after Tommy Douglas passed away, it was handed off to his daughter, Shirley Douglas. But her
yeah,
time between New York, LA, and Toronto, things are very busy. And by the
yeah,
time you get from 1986, when Tommy passed away, into 2017, things had really slowed down and kind of ground to a halt in terms of the
mhm,
activity of the organization. And there was a thought that the board might just
Mm.
close
oh,
the
Yeah.
foundation.
Yeah.
yeah,
So I said to David, hold that thought. I went back to my very good friend, Rick Smith, who was executive director of the Broadband Institute at the time,
mhm,
and I explained the situation. Uh, Unbeknownst to David Mackenzie or anyone else, the Broadband Institute, our board of directors, myself, Rick, Ed, had tried 3 times unsuccessfully to establish a foundation that would
yeah,
mirror the Broadband Institute. So the CRA had rejected our
oh,
application.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, even though the Fraser Institute did something similar,
Yeah.
yeah,
for whatever reason,
Right.
the CRA wouldn't let us do it. Um, there are many reasons why a foundation, this charity, is important and why it needs to be maintained. So from that point forward, I started working with the DCF, with David Mackenzie and the board, to sort of move things forward. Um, at the time, Carl Boulanger took over as president,
Uh-huh.
with a clear vision to reestablish this organization.
mhm,
And so it wasn't until after the pandemic in 2021 that the newly established board of directors decided, with some of the original board members from 2017, decided that they wanted me to come on board to lead the revitalization and the rejuvenization project.
nice.
The reason it's important is this. In the original letters patent from 1971, it states clearly that the mandate of this charity is to educate people about government, politics, and civic responsibility, and to do
Mhm,
that through research, publications, special events, lectures, seminars, and training.
Mhm.
You are not going to get that charitable mandate from the CRA
right.
today.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah,
are literally the last charity in the country that has a narrative attached to it that is essentially government political focused.
Mhm.
mhm,
And so we're able to work within that mandate to provide a lot of education to the broader public about the benefits of our democracy, and in particular about social democratic governments, politicians, and really progressive ideas.
Mhm. So you've got these central
great.
roles of provoking discussions and
Right.
convening conversations. That's from your mission statement. But it's about social democracy. Is it fair to say that the main way the DCLF does this is through that lecture series that you do in different cities?
It's
I've been to the one here in
Mhm,
Toronto, the David Lewis lecture that you do annually, which is
mhm.
always got an interesting lecture, and it also really has this kind of, I don't know, enjoyable social component. So
Right.
you're bringing out a movement, you're bringing some intellectual discussion to it. How does
There,
this
there-
lecture series work?
there's a lot of good stuff around the lecture series. It was
Yeah.
actually an idea that came out of a conversation with the late Bill Blakey.
Hmm.
When Bill found out that I was coming in to lead the organization, he got on the phone with me rather quickly about a lecture that used to happen, the Stanley Knowles
Mhm,
Right.
yeah,
Wordsworth lecture at the
yeah,
University of Winnipeg. And he said, Josh, this is something you should look at. I'm sure that they would want to do something with the foundation. And so working with Bill, we were able to establish our very first lecture event at the University of Winnipeg in 2022. Well, wouldn't you know that after that lecture, other universities started reaching out to us saying, "Hey, we would maybe want to do
Yeah,
something with
that's
you as well."
interesting. Yeah.
And by the next year, we
Uh-huh.
had established a relationship with the University of Victoria.
Mm.
At the time, we were in discussion with Alexa McDonough's family. And so we ended up establishing an event at Mount St. Vincent University in Halifax
Hmm.
under her name. Then at the University of Toronto under David Lewis, in memory of David and his incredible leadership. And it's just grown from there. So from that one event in
Uh-huh.
2022, we are now up to 8 lecture events in 8 different cities in 7 different provinces, Toronto and Ottawa being the
Right.
one that shares sort of the same province. Um, what's really remarkable, though, is that when you get a chance to get out and into a community and connect with people and discuss the issues that are important to them, whether they be national scope, federal jurisdiction, provincial jurisdiction, even municipal content, um, there's a level of appreciation there that is brand new and is exciting.
Hmm.
And it connects people to a foundation that otherwise would just be sitting in Ottawa.
Uh-huh.
And I don't think that that's how
Yeah.
you grow an organization. You need to be able to listen people, meet them where they are. And so it was important to me that we got on the road, and the lecture series
Yeah.
allows us to do that. We were just in Regina for the inaugural Tommy Douglas lecture at the
Excellent.
Okay.
University of Regina. Beautiful venue in Dark Hall. 496 people RSVP'd, be there in person. We have a beautiful reception afterward, cocktail reception. It's free for everybody to attend,
Uh,
thanks to all
nice.
of our union sponsors who help out with not only the lecture series tour, but also the local unions who decide to chip in at a local level for the specific event. But thanks to their generosity, we're able to provide a wonderful platform for our speakers to talk.
Yeah.
We're able to live stream it across the country, and we're able to excite a big audience. You have a mix of students, faculty, members and supporters of the foundation, but then you also have the broader public. I mean, for that
Yeah.
event, we
Yeah.
were promoted um, by the tourism board as,
Oh,
an
great. Yeah.
event that was
Huh.
happening in the city.
So just
Yeah.
Josh, you got
Mm,
Halifax, Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto,
that's
uh,
right.
Winnipeg, Regina,
Victoria
Victoria, and what am I missing?
Edmonton.
Edmonton.
and
Okay, I
Edmonton.
didn't
Edmonton
know.
is the
Yeah.
next new one. So the 2 new ones for
Excellent.
this
Nice.
year, Regina and then Edmonton. In Edmonton, it will be the Notley family
There you go.
lecture,
Oh, nice. Oh, that's
University of
great.
Alberta in Edmonton.
Yeah, I think sitting, in BC, it often feels like some of our organizations are just very Ottawa, Ontario centric. So I
Uh-huh.
love that you're bringing these lectures to
Mhm.
where people are at and where social democrats are at. So it makes us feel a lot more connected out here in the West,
Yeah,
even though you're
you know,
based in the East.
exactly.
Yeah.
And they look forward to it. And we get people reaching out saying,
Yeah.
when is your event coming to town? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's a good sign.
I like the events because it's a mix of people that you don't always see in the same room. People in the labor movement, people who
Right.
are maybe on riding association executives, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're new
That's right.
Democrats
Yeah.
who used to be or have other roles in the party, plus
Mm,
people who are part of the university, plus students who are at the university. So it's this
Right.
kind of
It's really, it's,
mash up of
yeah.
social groups that I
I,
think
I
is really
really do
kind of
like,
healthy.
yeah. You know what? I like engagement, but I
Yeah.
also like things that happen in real life. The foundation also has grown exponentially as a result of this tour. So our
Hmm.
exposure is greater. People are interested in what we're doing. Um, there are people within academia who are paying attention to kinds of things we're
Yeah.
talking about. Politicians, whenever we're in a city, we always make sure to let people know at the various
Hmm.
legislatures that we're going to be in town, and they're free to attend. But then you've got that student element to be on the road talking about the benefits of social democracy, social democratic governments, policies that are inclusive and that make the lives better for the majority of us. That's an opportunity I don't take for granted.
That's great. I think it's huge. It's that connection and other people, which we don't necessarily, we may have many events these days, but not
Mhm.
always ones that help connect us. So
You
I
know,
think,
it,
there's probably also a real benefit here. And we've been talking a lot on the show about regional histories and variations of social democracy in Canada. So kind of leaning into what you get to see in those regional histories and regional needs, which has been, where there's been successes in provincial electoral successes for New Democrats.
mhm.
What in the series are you seeing as some of those regional social democratic flavors that look differently depending where you are?
Yeah,
So,
the big one is the economy and employment.
Mm, yeah.
Regionally in this country, um, that issue is something that can almost divide people. There are different needs in different places. The word infrastructure means
Hmm.
different things to different people. Um, you have places like Ontario, which is huge, and a city like Toronto is an ecosystem all itself. It's its own region, really. The
Yeah.
GTA, it has very different needs than the majority of Canadians living in other places,
Hmm.
and so it's quite unique. But I would say the economic concerns where job growth needs to happen, um, that is probably the most different from place to place to place.
Hmm.
And
like different
it
industries
almost
or
feels as
different
if
types of
within,
jobs, Josh,
um, well, let's say,
or
you take a,
approaches?
I would say approaches is probably the
Approaches.
better way to look at it. People think of Ottawa as a government town.
Mhm.
Uh,
Hmm.
the suburbs of Toronto used to be manufacturing,
Right.
and that's all gone. I think that there is a fear that in many cities in Canada, the foundational jobs, the foundational economic drivers, may not be there in the future.
Mm.
And there are different ways that governments are dealing with that, but that seems to be the one that's very stark in terms of its
Hmm.
difference. Wherever you go, it's the same issue, but it's different because the jobs are different, or that sector, that primary sector, is different. Here in Ottawa, we're getting the threats. Well, we're seeing already public sector cuts to the federal government. That issue alone is a big deal. The impacts of AI. We did a lecture in Ottawa called
Yeah.
Ghost in the
Yeah.
Machine on AI. We're going to follow that up again this year.
Mhm.
We have a ministry dedicated to AI, but yet we have no
Hmm.
legislation that controls it or regulates it, which is
Hmm.
what is going on. And, you talk
Yeah.
with the president of PIPS, and Sean will tell you, they're not
Sorry,
prepared
just
for it.
Pips being a government employee, federal government employee union, right?
That's right. Yeah, the
Wonderful.
Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada.
Mhm.
And he'll tell you that they're not prepared, and that it's not even doable. And yet we're already
Hmm.
seeing the federal government make decisions about laying off thousands of people.
Yeah.
It's a huge impact here in Ottawa.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's probably one of the places where you see the impacts really go throughout the entire community when you
Hmm.
have those kinds of major cuts, not only here in Ottawa but also across the river in Gatineau. I think that's the part that I love, is
Right.
Yeah.
when you get to be on the
Yeah.
ground, you get to learn these things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like when you're working with different sectors and you understand their issues. Everybody's driving towards the same goals,
Hmm.
but they have different issues, different challenges.
Well, we
Yeah.
saw it even just last week. I mean, forestry. I guess forestry used to kind of be a big issue in Ottawa, but it's not
Mhm.
anymore. Maybe like 100 years ago.
Not
But
David
British
Eby will tell
Columbia.
you it is not right now.
We
But
we don't see the annual log drive
no,
down the
you don't. Not
river anymore.
anymore. But that was actually a big piece of
Yeah.
Canadian history at one point, floating logs down to
That's right.
Montreal. But British
Yeah.
Columbia, obviously, logging,
Mhm.
forestry, lumber,
Quebec,
sawmills, extremely important.
Yeah.
We've
yeah.
seen
BC
your
trying to get
premier Nikki.
Ottawa to remember that
Mhm.
there's
Yeah,
lumber. Yeah.
Or
Northern Ontario,
New Brunswick.
Quebec issue throughout there, and New Brunswick,
Mhm.
but not often high in the national consciousness. And
Yeah.
and and something it just leads me to this, back to the idea you're talking about, and it's something that stuck with me a long time ago when I heard Roy Romano speak once, he was premier of Saskatchewan, and he said something about federalism that really, really kind of has stuck in my head all these years. Each province and each provincial capital was like a pearl. That was his
Mhm.
analogy. And that the job of the federal leader, a prime minister, party leader, whatever, is to find the common theme and needs that kind of is the string that pulls those pearls together
Mhm.
and makes something, a beautiful necklace, right? That's the
Yeah,
implicit
Mhm.
Ed Broadbent
picture.
used to talk about that quite a bit,
Uh-huh.
and the importance of it. He would refer often to Trudeau Senior, um, resenting the fact that the
Yes.
NDP had support across the country, and yet his was so isolated, right, and
Mhm.
not representative of everyone. I think you're 100% right on
Well, it's
that.
not me, it was Roy Romano, but what do you think about, I mean, your
Oh,
organization is
sure.
one that's not just in Ottawa. You're kind
Mhm.
of federated yourself, and you're connected
Well,
to provincial
yeah, it's
parties, to
my
provincial labor movements, to provincial universities.
Mhm.
What are the themes, and what do you think about this ability to pull together that string that
Well,
unites
I will
Canada?
say it's by design,
Mm,
and it is not easy work.
yeah.
It takes a lot of planning, but then there's the relationships that need
Mhm.
to exist. Uh, and not just the relationships, but then also a level of trust. And even within these regions, within the different provinces, you are going to have competing interests. And so we aren't able to satisfy everybody's needs and wants each year. And so we do have to somewhat focus from event to event on how we can be helpful in the moment.
Mhm.
Uh, and we try our best to do that. But that is a core strength of ours, Tom, to be able to
Yeah.
get out on the ground across the country every year to build those relationships, to bring new relationships to the front, but then reinforce the ones that we already have so that we do have that trust. And it really is something special when you're able to walk away from one of these events that we do. It's been a big success. And then for the next couple of weeks, you're getting thank you notes in the mail,
Mm,
in the inbox. It really does mean something to people. Uh,
Mhm.
we're there, that we're listening.
mm,
Most importantly, that we're listening and that we're trying to be helpful in the way that we can be. And by bringing in expert voices has also been interesting too. So we'll bring experts in from across the country, oftentimes paired with people who are local, who are on the ground with those issues, or maybe it could be an academic researcher, it might be an economist,
Mhm.
it
mm,
could be
mm.
it could be any number of people who um, are well informed and helpful to the conversation. When I came on board, the organization was quite small. And when I say small, it didn't have an office.
Yeah.
It didn't it didn't have full-time staff.
I
Um,
remember rumors, Josh, that at one point it had $7,000 in a bank account, and that was
yeah,
the rumor. It
I
was
mean,
going to
we're
be
we're
shuttered.
talking
Yeah,
very, very modest.
yeah.
And, I was taking a huge leap of faith,
Mhm.
in the board, in myself, I guess. The amount of trust and faith that Lydia gave me, I guess, is also notable.
Yeah.
Um, but leaving the Broadbent Institute, where I had been for a decade, since the very beginning, I of course talked to Ed about the decision before going anywhere. Had his blessing. Um, I mean, I knew right off the bat that we had to grow our base. The
Yeah.
the database had 1,500 contacts. Not all of
Really.
the emails worked or even had
Yeah.
emails. The phone numbers didn't work. I think we had at the time something like 130 annual donors.
Mhm. Mm,
We're now up over 4,000 annual donors.
good work.
Mhm.
And, so I mean, the database went from a very small amount. We're now over 60,000 people in the database who are actively looking at our email content, at our newsletters, at the research projects we have coming up. I mean, any number of things, attending events.
Uh-huh.
So that growth is happening, but it wouldn't have happened if I accepted this position and then just sat here in Ottawa and waited for everybody to come.
Didn't get out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's no way to act. That's
Yeah.
you can't. It's disingenuous, and
Yeah.
so that isn't what I don't believe Tommy and MJ Caldwell would have wanted. I know that's not the style of Jack Layton either.
Yeah.
And you have to get out and talk to people about the things that they're concerned with, where they are, and if
Yeah.
you do that and you show genuine interest, you can build something.
A few weeks ago, I saw you had an op-ed in the Hill Times, and it was
Mhm.
on the need of for the federal NDP to keep the goal of winning as
Mhm.
its North Star.
Mhm.
I know it's something that you worry about, you're impassioned about, and some people talk about that sort of concept of having power, but at what price as
Mhm.
well when we think about the national movement. But you say on its head, you're talking about the real price that's paid by not having power. Can you explain that? Why do you think it's so
Sure.
crucial and what people know?
The reality is social democracy as a political movement and force is there to govern for the benefit of everyone.
Uh-huh.
If we want to see the kind of change that can happen in our society, it is not good enough for us to wait around for opportunities for liberals and conservatives to give us a small crack where maybe they leverage us into a corner to get a little piece of what we want. I'm quite frankly frustrated at the idea that people are happy that think that social democrats should simply be the conscience of Parliament.
Yeah.
It's not what Tommy wanted. It's not what David Lewis wanted. Um, it's certainly not what Jack strived for. Ed Broadbent talked passionately about the need for forming government. Um, it frustrates me to no end to think that it's good enough to hold up a placard and march down the street. We need the majority of Canadians to say, I trust that a social democratic government will be good for me, my family, my community.
Hmm. Yeah.
We need to establish that trust. We have it provincially. We see British Columbia, we see it in Saskatchewan, Manitoba. In
Yeah.
Ontario, we had a great opportunity, and I think that opportunity will arise again shortly. Nova Scotia, not too long ago. But federally, there's been a disconnect. So, so yeah, that has to be part of the plan. I understand the challenge we're in, but let's just put it in perspective here. Donald Trump was elected in November of 2024.
Mhm.
He started making threats immediately.
Mhm.
Yeah.
By the time he was inaugurated in late January, the threats were full blown. People were terrified. Well, social democrats need to have good answers to make
Yeah.
people feel confident and comfortable
Mhm.
that when in government, they will have their best interests at heart.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so there's an opportunity here over the next few years, now that Mark Carney has given himself some time
Yeah.
to govern as he would like, um, for Avi Lewis and the Canadian Social Democratic Party, the NDP, um, to provide an option
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
Canadians can take
That's
seriously,
yeah.
whether they're liberals, conservatives, New Democrats, or Green Party members, even if they're Bloc members in Quebec, or supporters or past voters, there's an opportunity here to be taken advantage of, especially with Mark Carney giving us so much space
Yeah.
as he tacks to the right.
Let's
Yeah.
We
let's
can get
just
into
probe
that because that's a whole new thing.
let's just probe that a bit, Josh, and get your
Yeah.
thoughts on this. Well, certainly one person who's done a lot to unite Canadians has been Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's right.
And Carney certainly rode to power as the anti-Trump. I don't think there's any argument about that.
Masterful job.
But now he's launching a so-called sovereign wealth fund to handle the
Mm,
privatization of public
mm,
assets like
mm,
ports and airports, maybe
yeah.
Canada Post. There's talk about that.
Yep.
There's budget cuts to transfers and social programs that have been
Mhm.
written about. They're very
Mm-hmm.
clear in the budget, but they're not real top line information, but they're there. Closing the door on pharmacare. We
Mm-hmm.
talked about that
Yep.
in our last show. Um,
Mm-hmm.
how does that contradict the like, I understand why people want Build Canada. I
Mm-hmm.
want that. That's how we defend ourselves from Trump. This
Sure.
doesn't seem like that, though. And I'm
No.
wondering if this opens a space where, going back to that idea of pulling the strings together, that we can pull some strings together within the social democratic movement across the country,
Mm-hmm.
in the regions of this
Sure.
country, with
Right.
some sort of response of what
Well,
a real national Build Strong would
I'm
be
gonna
like, one that isn't selling our national treasures.
well, I'm gonna actually tie the two together.
Mm-hmm.
So the last point and this point, because I will say this: Mark Carney is good with numbers on paper. Economist. He wants to make the numbers work. I don't think he's too concerned with the human costs. I don't think that's his priority. I really don't. And we've all heard pharmacare is going to get wound down, is essentially what's going to happen. The healthcare transfers are going to be getting cut. The public service is getting cut, the federal public service. There's all sorts of things that are happening that I got to tell you, I don't think Pierre Poilievre would ever have gotten away with had he been the prime minister.
Well, the Liberals would be complaining.
Oh, I think the media would just be going
Sure.
bonkers with
Yeah.
it. I think the biggest threat was the cuts to the CBC, and everybody was on fire about it. Imagine if Pierre Poilievre was talking about, cutting healthcare and cutting pharmacare, then you would have marching in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems that Mark Carney really is playing on the vulnerabilities of Canadians, the fears of Canadians, that we do have all of a sudden within one election. Our greatest friend, ally, and trading partner has become a threat. And Canadians are feeling vulnerable and weak. And Carney, I believe, is exploiting that goodwill and that faith. And that's unfortunate. Now, let's talk about the Sovereign Wealth Fund. And we saw Don Davies do a masterful job in the House of Commons
Mhm.
talking about the Norway model.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love the Norway model. I think New Democrats historically have loved that idea. Petro-Canada, the whole concept of nationalizing our resource sector has always been top of mind. So why don't we take advantage of that opportunity? Why don't we talk not about what Mark Carney is doing, but instead prepare ourselves for the next election where we propose specifically a Norway-esque model that would help ensure that every person who wants to be educated gets to be educated, that every person, when their working career is done, can retire in dignity. Let's make sure that no person is hungry or starving, no child is raised in poverty. We do all these great things. So why don't we do that? Because if we were to propose that to Canadians and say, this is what we're going to do it, that would be a huge incentive.
Mhm.
But for us just to complain about it and point, like Mark Carney's got his majority, he's going to do what he wants to do. Why don't we think big? Why don't we talk about taking advantage of the resources that we have? We do it responsibly. We do it as safely as we can. And we make sure that every Canadian benefits from it. Ed Broadbent used to talk about political will. So why don't we demonstrate that we have some? That said, the social good that would come out of such a program, I think, would also be so wonderful for the entire country. We could do a ton of good, and we can also do things extremely well while we're protecting the environment. And and the other thing is this: if we're not in government, who's there? You've got the Liberals or the Conservatives, right? So it's not Social Democrats. They're not going to do the things that we want to do. They're going to do their things. They may campaign sometimes and sound like Social Democrats to win over voters, but then they're going to do the things that they want to do anyway. What I would love to see is for our party to be focused on governing for the good of the entire country and for future generations. And I think sometimes, social democrats need to get out of our own way. And, we have to understand that in today's world, these challenges, these fears, these concerns are real. And what people want is a real solution that they believe will help. But if they don't trust social democrats, if they don't have confidence in social democrats, if they don't think we can win, we're not going to win them over. And that's
Mm.
the problem. We need to focus on forming a government in this country and real electoral reform.
Mm.
And between between today and the day that we form that first government, we have to find a way to win. And that's the point. So we can't rely on liberals to do the things that we want to do. We need to rely on ourselves to get those things done. Not everything we want to do we have to, we have pretty extensive platforms in the past. We can make things comprehensive without making things overly complicated, so that way people are confident and comfortable. And I will say too, um, I think if we started talking about responsible, um, progressive governments, social democratic governments in this country with big ideas that were for the benefit of everyone, and not picking winners and losers, we would end up also too with people who would be really strong candidates. A-
Hmm.
And we need strong candidates. If we are
Yeah.
going to form a government in this country, who's going to be in the ministry?
Uh-huh.
Who is the
Yeah.
Minister of Finance for the Social Democratic Party? We should be able to answer that kind of a question, and Canadians should feel comfortable that we're able to do it as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I could go off here. I mean, it's just,
Yeah, I know. I wish we could spend more time digging into
yeah,
it. But good
wow.
news on folks being able to go to
Yeah.
events. And
The
Josh,
real good news
thanks
is
so
that we've,
much for joining us and sharing everything you're doing and that
oh,
the Douglas Caldwell Layton Foundation's
mhm.
doing and really how you think the movement's doing and where we can grow. So we wish you folks all the luck and we hope to see you at all the events. I really appreciate being able to have Western-based events from an Ottawa organization. So great job with that. And
Thank
we're
you.
going to take a quick break and be right back with Love It or Heave It.
Thanks,
Okay.
Josh.
Thank you all very much.
Before we wrap up, we've come to that part of the show we call Love It or Heave It, about something you love and want to keep or something you'd like to heave and forever forget. What about you for this week, Nikki?
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to frame anything related to sexual and intimate partner violence as a love, even when we get an important policy change here. So I'm going to go with a thumbs up on some progress in BC. So a little backstory first. A couple of years ago, 2024, BC's Attorney General Nikki Sharma, when she was early in the role, commissioned Dr. Kim Stanton to do a systemic review of how the BC legal system treats victims and survivors of sexual and intimate partner violence, because there were so many issues that survivors and victims were having, not just seeking justice, but even being safe.
Mhm.
So last year, and almost a year ago, in June 2025, Dr. Stanton delivered that report. And then last week, we've starting to see some policy change from the BC Prosecution Service when they released what they're calling the Victims of Crime Policy. So this does respond directly to some of the key findings in the Stanton report. And what it does is set up some updated policies with clear expectations to ensure that victims are going to get timely and consistent information about their cases, especially when we're talking about things like release conditions
Yeah,
or changes that impact their safety. So really
for
critical
sure.
here. It's also going to support how victims can navigate the court process. So including when they're going to be testifying or preparing victim impact statements, which really wasn't reflected in our systems. So reinforcing here that there is a responsibility to treat victims with care and respect as they go through these cases. So overall, trying to make a shift here is recommended in the report, which is great to see the expertise brought here, putting victims' needs at the center of the legal process. One would think that wouldn't be a big jump, But, obviously this has been long overdue, and hopefully other jurisdictions are taking a look as well, because you need to be shifting the burden away from survivors and actually onto the system to make sure that decision making is better informed. But, really, I think primarily here, avoiding delays, in some cases, you're re traumatizing victims. So, good news for victims and survivors, but also showing some policy progress here that advocates have been championing for years.
Mm, that is good news. Um,
Yeah. Okay, Tom,
Boy,
what are you
I have
loving or heaving?
yeah, yeah. What am I loving or eating? I am loving the strategy that is apparent behind a couple moves last week by Carla Beck and the
Huh,
Saskatchewan
yeah.
NDP. One was a motion to establish a special committee of MLAs to focus on rising costs, including rising land costs for farmers, for producers, and related to Canada's biggest corporate farm, a Monette mega farm. Now,
Mm,
probably most of us have not heard of this, but for many years now, several years, I should say, Monette had been aggressively buying up land, pushing up prices. It became over leveraged, and it's now in creditor protection. The big backer of Monette was Scotiabank, which fronted it $850 million to go on this
wow.
land buying spree. So,
Mhm.
Nikki, damn the Eastern banks, right? That's a nice
I know
dynamic that,
is that what we say out here?
yeah, well, I don't know. That's a good thing to say in Regina, I think. The Scott Moe, the Scott Moe party, of course, voted down the Sask NDP proposal. Like he doesn't care about farm issues, right? The
Yeah.
other was a release of research showing women in Moose Jaw are now waiting an unacceptable average of 10 weeks to get back news on a breast cancer biopsy. These
Mm,
are both important issues,
yeah.
not the culture war slop that we get from conservatives. And I love that. I love that there's some integrity here. And I love that they are both focused on ridings the Sask NDP knows it needs to win to defeat Scott Moe. To get
Mhm.
from opposition to government, Carla Beck needs all the seats in Regina and Saskatoon, plus the 2 northern seats, plus she needs seats in Moose Jaw and Prince Albert. And that is who she is speaking to with these kind of moves. That is smart
Yeah.
politics. It's good politics. It's good policy. And this is the kind of focus I love. And it is why the most recent poll came out last month, showed the Sask NDP and the Sask party tied at 45%. And I love that too.
Right. And again, I think we've had some themes here in this show about, where voters and the public are really focused right now, and why
Right?
politicians aren't getting there and what happens when they do. So,
Yeah.
um,
Meet
you
them where
know,
they're at, right?
yeah,
Know where you
exactly.
got to win.
Okay, well, that was our show for the week. We're going to be back next Monday with the BC Water Legacy's Corey Tull.
All
And
right.
take care until then, Tom.
Okay. Have a great week. Take care.
Thanks for joining Left East to West with hosts Nikki Hill and Tom Parkin. We'd love to hear your comments, ratings, follows, and shares. It helps people find us. To become a Left East to West community member and to help us reach even more Canadians, subscribe using the link in the show notes. You can watch us on YouTube or listen wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Just search for Left East to West and subscribe. I'm Doug Hamilton signing off for Left East to West. We'll see you next week.